Hello, bookworms of Concord. If you've come over here from TikTok for this review, I finally got the video up. I promised you a full review of Unmasking Autism, The Power of Embracing Our Hidden Neurodiversity by Dr. Devon Price. So the reason for the full review is because of a major disagreement I have with Dr. Price. But before I get into that, I'll talk about it generally, and then I'll talk about a little bit about some really good things about the book. So the book, obviously, you can tell, is not very long. It's only about 264 pages of reading material, and there's like 30 plus pages of endnotes, which have been helpful in my own research in the book that I'm writing. Which I made a video about that on this channel. You can go and see that announcement. And so, normally, 264 pages is not a lot. Normally, I would have completed this book in 2 to 3 days, but I had to read it much slower because I'm on the challenging yet exciting journey of unmasking my own autism, which I was recently diagnosed with almost 2 years ago, November 2023. So not exactly 2 years, but almost. So before I get into my major critique about the book, so I'll talk about the positives first. So Dr. Price has done a great amount of research into autism, and not just talking about their own experience with being on the spectrum, but also the experience of others. And there's a lot of extremely helpful exercises in here that I have found personally beneficial. One of those, if you've been following me on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter as well, or or if we're friends on Facebook, you would have seen one of those exercises, which is Special Interests Week. And this is not a specific week that happens annually. It was developed by somebody Dr. Price found out about, where as an autistic person is beginning to unmask, the Special Interest Week is meant to reflect on your past and current special interests, and finding joy in those, and maybe and not just growing comfortable with having joy in those special interests, despite how people will kind of negatively react to that. It's meant to give you the joy in that, and to, as I said, I think I was saying, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Maybe reclaiming some older joys of past special interests you've had, and just being open about your special interests. So, for example, when I was a kid, one of my earliest special interests was reading books. And which was, and I just devoured books between 3rd and 5th grade, and it didn't last too long after that, because right after that, like 6th grade, all my male friends were getting really into cars and sports, and whenever I talk about books or some other special interest, I just get ignored, or viewed as the weird kid. So I masked my special interests by hiding it. That's what masking is, and feigning interest in cars and sports, and that lasted till I was 31, right after seminary, when I gained that special interest again. Hence this whole channel, which I don't expect to make any money off of or to become really popular. It's just a way for me to express, not just express my joy or express myself, but to share that joy of books with other people who share the same the same joy as I do. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. So yeah, that's just one of the many exercises in the book that have been super helpful. I'm not going to get into any of the others. Pretty much all of them have been just great reflections. So now into the negatives. Before I get into the primary one, just somewhat of a minor critique with the endnotes. There are some references that, not a whole lot, but some references that just aren't like very professional. Like there was one endnote I went to go look at, and the source that was cited was Quora. I'm like, Quora, really? It's not a reputable primary source. It's or even a secondary source. It's just some random person on the internet really giving their opinion of a question. So, yeah, that doesn't happen very often. But I can only recall one Quora citation. There are a lot of other sources that might be considered unprofessional, and these are other like people on giving their expertise on Instagram or YouTube. These are other autistic people or like autistic life coaches. Those I don't criticize those at all, because the unfortunate thing about autism is that neurotypical people just barely know anything about it. That even with therapists and doctors, that we have to be the experts on it to educate people about what autism is. So that's why you're seeing if you do see a lot of self-advocating autistic people or other neurodivergent people, that's why. Because just there's still this vast ignorance about it. So citing self-advocating experts on social media is not unprofessional, in my opinion. But so now finally my primary critique. So it is true. I will say Price's work has significantly contributed to autism education and self-advocacy, but most of Price's book bears the marks of that typical angry social justice warrior, rather than a truly professional, thoughtful psychologist. So that being said, as I said in my TikTok video, let me make it irrevocably clear that I by no means endorse the maltreatment and abuse of people suffering with gender dysphoria, but neither do I support the breaking away with the gender God created one to be at their birth. With that said, Price consistently fails to consider autists who do not identify with transgender struggles for deeply religious and non-bigoted reasons. And yes, that is possible. For many of us, the struggles are not similar. So there's this constant conflation of transgenderism with autism throughout the book. And it's frustrating. So, as I said, for many of us, the struggles are not similar. For example, as a male, I identify with many of the female autistic traits that Dr. Price lists in the chapter, which they rightfully criticize. These typical female autistic traits that are only in females, which is not true, and Price correctly criticizes that. So I'll just list a few of those traits that I've identified with. I'm not going to enumerate the list. So one of them is having trouble recognizing or naming one's feelings. That historically has been viewed as a female autistic trait, but it goes across both genders. So say like if a female autistic person does not have trouble recognizing or naming one's feelings, then they would be more likely to be diagnosed, because that's apparently a male trait that we can uh, recognize or name our feelings. But that's not entirely true across the autism spectrum. Um, so another one is might be ignoring or suppressing emotions until they bubble up and explode. Um, we might become disturbed or overwhelmed when others are upset but uncertain how to respond or support them. Going blank and seeming to shut down after prolonged socializing or when overstimulated. Reporting a high degree of anxiety, especially social anxiety. I mean, again, like autistic males experience that too. So there's just this long list of these female autistic traits that males often also experience alongside females. So, it's true that many of these don't fully represent a female autist, which, again, Price readily and rightfully admits. But it is also true that many male autists, such as myself, identify with these so called female autistic traits, not because we think we're female, but because of the character quality. So, because I am not an aggressive male, for example, I am not a very aggressive person at all. Does that mean I'm a woman? Does that mean I should seek to incorporate traditionally female traits in my behavior? Of course not. That's absurd. It's rather ironic, that trans activists reject traditional gender norms, but in order for a biological male to embrace his true identity as a woman, he needs to engage in traditional female gender norms, such as wearing dresses, high heels, having long hair, wearing makeup, etc. It is also ironic that trans activists reject the scientific view that sex organs define a person's gender. But again, if a biological male wants to identify as a woman, he can get his penis surgically removed to be replaced with an artificial vagina, which doesn't make sense. If sex does not define gender, why the removal of sexual organs for another? And equally as fallacious is a person on taking on the identity of non-binary with the belief that gender is a spectrum rather than binary. But he or she will incorporate traditional binary gender norms in their person. For example, a non-binary person might wear feminine dresses while retaining masculine hair on their legs and armpits, keep their female reproductive organs, but take pills to alter their voice to sound more masculine. These are two, traditional binary traits existing in a single person. They are not traits existing somewhere between or outside male and female, but are both simultaneously existent in that person. Thus, it's still binary. So, yeah. So Price is a trans autistic psychologist who champions gender non-conforming individuals, not just because of the trans movement, but also because autistic individuals can be gender non-conforming, or both autistic and trans. Price advocates for this marginalized group while at the same time marginalizing those autists who do not identify with the trans movement and are even ostracized for not identifying with it. And ostracization is of autists is a major issue Dr. Price discusses throughout the book. It would be more intellectually honest to say traditional gender traits that are overly heightened, like male aggression, like I was saying earlier, are not indicative of autism based on gender. It's not that autism and trans are on the same wavelength. It's that gender does not factor into autism, but rather neurobiology and behavioral traits as the diagnostic criteria according to the DSM-5. Gender has nothing to do with diagnosing autism. Nothing whatsoever. So Price Price gives a personal account. They say, I was raised and socialized as a bit of an odd freak more than I was a boy or a girl. Neither girls nor boys related to me as one of their own, and I didn't identify with them either. So, no, I completely sympathize. In my childhood, I was also the weird kid. I also found myself not fitting into traditional male norms. I didn't and still don't have a deep appreciation for sports and cars that other men enjoy. and and like I was saying before, neither am I aggressive or competitive. Um, and despite my very logical and stoic nature, I am also very sensitive, empathetic, intuitive, and vulnerable, like women, generally speaking. But I'm still male. Later in life, I started to gain fewer male friends and more female friends because I began identifying with my male peers less. But I'm still male. This doesn't mean I should identify as a woman, and doesn't mean I should identify as non-binary. I am simply a male who is neurodivergent, which means I don't and cannot conform to certain norms, whether these are male norms or generic societal norms. But I am still a man. Even more, I am a man who is baptized, an autist who is baptized, a husband who is baptized, a brother who is baptized, and so on, a child of God redeemed by Jesus Christ. Sharing similarities with the opposite gender does not make you that gender, or no gender at all. I relate a lot to the reclusive Finns, but that doesn't make me Finnish, right? I'm still American and autistic American. Price writes an oversimplifying remark. Transphobic people often take the strong association between gender variance and autism as a sign that we aren't really trans, or we're just autistic and confused. So, no, you are trans in the sense that you are struggling with the gender you were born with, and you are autistic, both of which cause you suffering. But you can still be female without conforming to female norms. You don't have to pretend to be a male or nothing at all in order to embrace that part of yourself. You were born autistic, and that's okay. You were born female or male, and that's okay too. Now, the first article of the Apostles' Creed has to do with creation and the first person of the Trinity, God the Father, right? I believe in God the Father, Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. And as we memorize in the Lutheran Small Catechism, when we confess this, we are confessing, I believe that God has made me and all creatures, that he has given me my body and soul, eyes, ears, and all my members, my reason and all my senses, and still takes care of them. God made you male or female, Genesis 1:27, right? And sure, that might mean you struggle with the norms of your assigned gender at birth because we live in a corrupt, sinful world, just as an autistic person struggles to live in a neurotypical world for the same reason. Research shows that, or rather, highly supports the theory that autism is genetically inherited, and so is your gender. Now that doesn't. Well, what about those who are whose sexual organs are more androgynous, I believe is the term. I forget the exact term. That's an entirely separate issue. Not going to get into that. So, the answer is not to reject what God has made you. There's a reason why fully transitioned trans people still suffer inordinately with depression and suicidal ideations, ranging from 32 to 50%. Thus, transitioning cannot be the answer. The answer is to embrace whom God has made you, to embrace you. If you're a female who doesn't like wearing dresses and instead you like getting dirty outside with the boys and you don't like being ladylike, you know what? That's okay. But you're still a woman. Um, or if you're a male and you don't like being aggressive and competitive um, with sports or anything else, or you don't like getting dirty outside and underneath the hood of a car, and instead you're a naturally sensitive person, that's also okay. But you're still a man. It's okay to be a sensitive man. Uh, and it is not okay to hate this part of yourself so much that you need to undergo a massive, irreversible physiological transformation just to accept yourself. That is psychologically damaging. That you need to change who you are in order to accept yourself rather than accepting yourself as you already are, which is the whole point of unmasking to begin with, whether you're born male, female, or autistic. And it just astounds me when trans affirming psychologists cannot see how psychologically damaging that is. You're already who you are. No transformation is necessary. So, similarly, getting back on track with autism, autistic people, as I was saying earlier, we are born with autism. We conform to neurotypical social standards because it's what's expected of us. We're pressured to do it. Part of unmasking is learning what it means to be our natural selves. That doesn't include pretending to be someone we're not. If I'm an autist who doesn't like engaging in small talk, I shouldn't have to. If having deep, meaningful conversations is where I feel the most like myself and the most fulfilled, these are the type of people I should surround myself with. It would be even more psychologically damaging if I needed to transform myself into a neurotypical person who thrives on small talk. And as we will, as we see throughout the book, if you read it, is this masking is psychologically damaging. Another thing, it's this getting away from the trans topic now. Price is also of the opinion. It's another major critique of mine. Price is of the opinion that white supremacy is responsible for the massive dearth of autism diagnoses among Black and brown people. Now, I don't entirely discount these Black autists' experiences, but they do not represent all people of color like Price makes it out to be. It's intellectually dishonest to assume all people of color, even those on the spectrum, share the same experiences. I'm Black and Hispanic with a white father, but I don't identify with many Black and Hispanic cultural norms. Does that not make me Black and Hispanic? Should I identify as a white person instead? No, that's absurd. I'm still Black and Hispanic. I simply don't need to exhibit the norms typically associated with Black and Hispanic people in order to be truly Black and Hispanic. Just as a man does not need to exhibit the norms typically associated with men in order to be a man. Same thing with women. The answer for this is the answer is not for the man to become a woman or non-binary person, just as the answer for me is not to become a white Finnish person, even though I strongly relate to their cultural reclusiveness, or to be neurotypical when it's been psychologically damaging for me. I'm using Finland as an example because my wife is from Finland. Anyway, so as much as Price blames white supremacy, i.e. racism, for the lack of diagnoses for Black and brown people on the spectrum, Price ironically makes a rather racist statement. They say that the lower a family's socioeconomic status, the less likely they are to have access to healthcare of any kind. Now, that's true insofar as we're just talking about a low socioeconomic status, but Price assumes all Black and brown people fall under the category of low socioeconomic status, which is an incredibly racist assumption. What about wealthy celebrities like Morgan Freeman? Is he the exception to the rule? If he is, it is inherently racist to say it's a rule that black and brown people are of low socioeconomic status no matter their circumstances of their birth. No, I'm a brown pastor in a predominantly white Christian denomination. I do not hold a low socioeconomic status. And it is racist and offensive to assume I do just because of the color of my skin. I experience far more discrimination for being autistic than I do for being brown. Now, that's just my personal experience. It doesn't mean it's the same for everybody else. So Price also claims that, quote, racism influences how teachers and specialists perceive and screen for autistic traits in black and brown kids. Now, because of the research displayed in that part of the book, I do not doubt this happens in some cases, but I hesitate to paint the lack of autism diagnoses among black and brown people with the wide brush of racism or white supremacy. More likely, it is cultural ignorance, which has to do with lack of exposure rather than inherent or inheritable racism. Special considerations for autism diagnosis might need to be made, for example, about a white person born and raised in South Africa versus a white person born and raised in America. This isn't racism. It is simply cultural ignorance due to a lack of knowledge and experience. And both knowledge and experience can be easily acquired through mutual respect and communication. So to reiterate, I do not doubt that there are some cases of racism regarding autism diagnoses among black and brown people. I simply do not believe it's the boogeyman liberals make it out to be. I have my own experiences with racism, one of which was a bullying incident, but another is similar to what Price shares about a friend. They write, because I am African, this is quoting their friend, because I'm African American, I have a different English to speak, which is African American English. So I was placed into speech therapy, in my opinion, to sound like a person who speaks the standard American English. So I had the same exact experience in my childhood, and it was definitely racist. In my younger years, my accent was that of, I believe, a Puerto Rican born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. And when we moved into the white suburbs of Canton, Michigan, I was put into speech therapy to sound more like a white person. And their excuse was that I had a speech impediment, but my white dad kept telling them I don't have a speech impediment. I was simply from Detroit. So that was definitely a racist event. But I have a hard time believing it's the boogeyman of white supremacy when my white dad advocated for his brown son. Okay. In fact, I experienced more racism from black and brown people. For much of my childhood, I was not black enough because I didn't wear the designer clothes that black people like to wear, and I didn't talk like them. So that doesn't happen so much today as an adult, but now I'm not truly black because I don't vote Democrat. Now, a note, I don't always vote Republican either. I merely go with my conscience. So, it's remarkable to me that innocent white people are falsely accused of racism while my black peers can get away with their racist remarks. It's called black privilege. So again, to conclude, I found much of Price's research on autism and the exercises provided to help us in the unmasking journey very helpful. I cannot emphasize that enough. Super helpful, especially in my own journey. But there is just an inordinate amount of transgender dogma that not every autistic person relates to. There are still, Price, perhaps ignorantly or purposefully, I don't know, underrepresents autistic Christians. So that's my full review. Hope you enjoyed it. If you hated everything I said, please try to be civil in the comments. If not, you're not going to hear from me. So I give this a 2-star rating because of all my critiques discussed. But that being said, if you are autistic and you'd like to embark on your own unmasking journey, I still recommend you read this book because, again, the research regarding autism is very good. The exercises are incredibly helpful. So if anything, read it for those. Just read the rest of it through a Lutheran lens, like we do with everything else. Whether we're reading a book written by a Baptist or a Roman Catholic or some other nonfiction book, always read it through a Lutheran lens. Otherwise, yeah. Hope you like this review, and I will see you next time. Heads up, I am traveling to Finland for 2 weeks. My wife, like I said before, she's from Finland, and she's currently studying for a master's degree there at the University of Helsinki. She has a surgery on Wednesday, January 29th. So I gotta kind of scramble and get over there. So might not see some videos from me for a while because I'll be over there for a minimum of 2 weeks. So thanks for watching, and until next time, God bless your reading.